Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back. I am Andrew Seligson, president of Campus Compact, and I am pleased to welcome you to our next session, The Road to Greater Justice and Equity, Lessons Learned Aligning Civic Engagement with Community College Priorities. Before I introduce our presenters and turn it over to them, I just want to remind you of a few things. The first is that by participating in these sessions, you agree to abide by our code of conduct, and our people right now are putting the link to that in the chat. It essentially says, be civil, respectful to each other, be a nice human being, we're all good. And I think generally people have been doing that, which we appreciate. So we've had some great conversations going on. If you have questions that you would like to direct to any or all of the presenters, we invite you to put those in the chat on whatever platform you're viewing this on, YouTube Live, Facebook, and our staff will share those with me to transmit later on, and we'll be able to pose those questions. If you have a technical question of any kind, same thing, just put it in the chat, and we will help you in any way that we can. All right, so with that, we can jump in. I will just introduce folks, and then, as I said, turn it over. So our presenters are Sarah Diel-Hunt, Vice President of Enrollment and Student Services at Heartland Community College, Bob Franco, Director of Institutional Effectiveness and Professor of Pacific Anthropology at Kapi'olani Community College, Stephen Hunt, Professor of Communications at Illinois State University, Lena Jones, Professor of Political Science at Minneapolis College, and Verdis Robinson, until recently our Director of Community College Engagement at Campus Compact, and now a divinity student at Meadville Lombard Theological School. And I will turn it over to you, Verdis, to take us forward.
Thank you. And it's a pleasure to be with you all. And I'm very, very excited about this, presentation. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just share my screen so that we can have our presentation. Just bear with me for a second, and here we go. And as the title of the session is named, The Road to Greater Justice and Equity. And it involves community colleges. And we all know that community colleges play a key role in democratizing the American landscape of higher ed and giving more people access to the American dream. With its affordability, accessibility, and open access policies, admission policies, community colleges have higher numbers of enrolled lower income students, non-traditional students, students of color than four-year colleges and universities. And they also have a higher percentage or high percentage of immigrant and English as a second, English as language learners among their student populations. However, most community colleges struggle with sustaining holistic campus life. Most often they are commuter campuses, whereas the students spend the majority of their time in the community than on campus. Students are working, taking care of families, managing other responsibilities, and additionally, issues with comparing four-year college assessment models for student success and the elitist perception of community colleges as junior colleges tend to make community colleges somewhat invisible. So how do we make the invisible more visible? And how do we get people or get everyone to really take notice of the wealth and worth of community colleges and see them as democracy's colleges and their students as democracy students? So in doing this, we also recognize that community colleges are well positioned to develop ways to benefit their communities and at the same time deepen the educational experience of their students. With decreasing budgets, however, and decreasing enrollments, many community colleges are limiting the priorities only to those that would appear most obvious in the ability to advance institutional success and effectiveness, such as workforce and economic development, access and enrollment, equity, as well as pathways to workforce, as well as continued education. With these in mind, and with these issues, how do we make civic engagement and civic learning a priority in community colleges for the future of our democracy? How do we ensure that community colleges students graduate as civic engaged, informed, and active agents of change, in addition to productive members of society in the workforce? How do we show that, in fact, civic engagement and learning strategies can leverage in very, very powerful ways to advance priorities related to institutional effectiveness, completion, change, as well as student success? Well, we have a panel today that will presenting some chapters that they have written for an upcoming presentation. And first we're gonna hear from Lena Jones, and then we're gonna go, who is in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And then we're gonna switch over to Illinois. And then we're gonna go all the way to across the Pacific Ocean to Hawaii to see how they are leveraging civic and community engagement to advance institutional priorities. Before we do that, this all came together through a new network of Campus Compact called Community Colleges for Democracy. And what it is a new national network of community college professionals committed to preparing students to be active, mobilized leaders in their community, states, and in the world, in addition to preparing them for the workforce, careers, and continued education. And so with the membership of Campus Compact, there are approximately 240 community colleges serving over 2 million students and advancing democracy in those institutions. So I just want to encourage you to stay connected. There's a national newsletter that goes out, as well as there's dedicated social media avenues to engage and also to connect on Facebook as well as on Twitter, and also a dedicated section on the Campus Compact website. And with further ado, I know I'm talking a little bit too much. We want to talk about the publication very, very quickly, as because of or the coronavirus has kind of halted its publication and its production. It is completed, and it's very, very exciting as we have examples of successful integration in community college priorities from community colleges all across the nation, including College of the Canyons in California, Durham Technical College in North Carolina, Piedmont Virginia Community College in Virginia, as well as Kingsborough Community College in New York, Lone Star College in Texas, and the ones that you're going to hear today. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic, well, the computer mic, if you will, to Lena Jones from Minneapolis to share her chapter and the work that they're doing at Minneapolis College.
All right, am I on, Verdis? Great, all right.
You're on.
Okay, thank you. And thank you to everyone who's at the session. I can't see anyone, but thank you for coming. So it excites me to be able to share a bit of the story about a special program at my college, the Community Development degree program at my college, and to share a little bit about its efforts to integrate civic and career education while occupying what I call the in-between spaces of a higher education institution. So my presentation, it'll focus a little bit on some of the good stuff, but I think it's really important too to share some of the challenges that we faced in those in-between spaces and some of the things that we've done to face those challenges, and also just share some of the challenges that we're still facing, and that in some ways may become even larger challenges in the given COVID-19 context. So a little bit about my college. It's a commuter campus between 6,000 and 7,000 students enrolled. The majority of our students live in neighborhoods in Minneapolis, and our student body is over 50% students of color and Indigenous. Average age is around 27, and between 60 and 70% of our students attend part-time. So a bit about the community development program, which will be the focus of the presentation. This program became operational in 2010, and it finds its origins in a neighborhood in Minneapolis called Phillips, which is also the birthplace of the American Indian movement and home of a significant portion of Minneapolis's Native American population. So the program was actually initiated by some leaders from an organization called the Native American Community Development Institute, or NACD, which I'll be using the acronym from now on, which is an alliance of Native American nonprofits and businesses. And this organization decided to aim for collaboration with the community college because they recognized the need for, to start to make some efforts to create, in words, a new generation of Native American leaders with both community organizing and community development skills. And so they created the program in collaboration with faculty members and administrators at the college. The program strongly reflects the vision of a man named Sidney Bean, who I've had the privilege of working with for many years. He was born on the Flandreau Santee Sioux Reservation, South Dakota, longtime community organizer and community developer, filmmaker, co-founder of NACD. Sid, who's now retired, was also the instructor of several of the program's core courses until 2016. So the program's Indigenous community development emphasis manifests in a few ways. The first is reflected in its support for the development of leaders who are rooted in the communities that they aim to transform. And this was one of the primary reasons why our college was chosen, since our students come from neighborhoods in Minneapolis. On a deeper level, the Indigenous emphasis is reflected in the program's holistic worldview, which emphasizes the interconnectedness of things and the need to create spaces for seeing and understanding power and analyzing systems that control and divide people and communities from one another. Sid would often say one of our main aims is to challenge what he'd call separation thinking. So one of the ways that we aim to challenge that separation thinking, is through encouraging our students not to simply focus on individual goals and accomplishments during their journey through the program. This is done by creating curricular and extracurricular spaces for students to build meaningful relationships with one another, with faculty, with community partners, to collectively think about their vision for their campus, their city, their state, their country, and to craft a career and life journey that feeds into that vision, and do all this really intentionally. At a practical level, this visioning process also involves helping students identify their talents and passions, explore vocations that would help them make a living and work towards their collective and individual goals, identify specific skills that they need to develop, and devise strategies for developing those skills both inside and outside of the program and the classroom. And many of the activities used to pursue these aims in the core courses and outside of the classroom draw heavily on different community organizing and popular education traditions. So now a little bit about the program and the challenges. So this is an interdisciplinary program. 60 credits, associate's degree. Some of the core classes that we've created include community development, Indigenous cultures, community organizing, history, theory, and practice. We have a politics, media, and organizing course, public policy course, a course that we created in collaboration with Pillsbury United Communities and Public Allies called Leadership in Politics Community Change. And there's also a field study course too, where students can do a traditional internship or a design field study that they design in collaboration with a faculty member and community partners. And the remaining parts of or required courses come from a variety of fields in liberal arts, some in the business program. And students also have 18 elective credits, which they are encouraged to use and tailor to their specific interests, their educational goals, and their career goals. So anyone who's created an academic program, and particularly an interdisciplinary one, knows that in order for it to survive, it needs to be fed and watered frequently. And the journey of this program illustrates the difficulty of providing that sort of nourishment within institutional structures that are built to support and perpetuate disciplinary boundaries. So for example, funding structures at many colleges, including my own, allow for budgetary support to go to academic programs that align with well-established disciplines. So since there are no community development courses with community development designators, they're all either political science or American Indian studies or other disciplines, there's no institutional funding for the program beyond the instructional costs of running the core classes. So the practical consequences for programs such as ours is that a lot of times they only survive if there's a dedicated faculty member, who's willing to take on coordination duties, promoting the program, recruiting students, supporting students once they're in the program, maintaining partnerships with community partners, making sure core classes are actually offered, making sure academic advisors have accurate information about the program. Often doing that without compensation for that work. Another consequence of disciplinary boundaries relates to credentialing. And we ran into some issues with increasingly rigid credentialing requirements from our larger system office. And we actually had a situation where the person who designed a class and taught it for several years and had many years of direct experience related to the content of the course was deemed ineligible by the system office to teach that course because his master's degree was in public administration instead of political science. And, if it wasn't until, a new dean came on board who, bless him, pushed for an exception to this ruling, that we were able to resume teaching the course. And interestingly, as I reflect, the current credentialing requirements, if they were strictly followed, would have probably prevented the program's founders, who both have graduate degrees in disciplines other than political science, from teaching the core courses in the program. So related to our in-between positioning, there was also a struggle for recognition within the institution. Again, a struggle that was created by these institutional structures. So when we designed the current version of the program, Sid Bean and I intentionally decided to locate the program's core courses in liberal arts departments, like political science, American Indian studies, while building in features typically found in career and technical programs, such as an advisory committee, such as a field study and internship requirement. And we did this because we wanted to offer students a highly transferable degree that also explicitly and intentionally prepared students for a vocational journey. However, due to the hybrid nature of the program was neither classified, in the beginning as a liberal arts or a CTE program. So the consequence was that even though the program was operational, it didn't exist in several key areas of the institution. So it was in the beginning, it was left off of institutional research reports, left off of institutional assessment projects, academic advising materials. So unfortunately, our advisors didn't know about the program. And again, this wasn't due to some sort of, malicious act of a person who had something out for us. I mean, it was, again, these institutional structures that prevented us from being seen. Eventually, the program did come to exist, due to persistent efforts of a lot of folks, some faculty, administrators, staff, students, community partners. And eventually the program was classified as a career program. So I'm talking about the challenges. I'll spend the last few minutes talking about some of the advantages too. So these structural challenges and the limited resources actually force us to think and act as organizers, constantly and intentionally widening and deepening our web of relationships within and outside of the institution, always analyzing the internal and external power dynamics that affect the quality and sustainability of the program. So in a sense, it forces us to practice what we preach and teach in order to survive. In the program's early years, we as a program, we were able to establish ourselves and survive without support from the college's general fund due to partnerships with nonprofit organizations. One of our major partners was a national organization called Community Learning Partnership, who helped us acquire grant funding and supplied the program with all sorts of human and monetary resources. The creativity necessary to survive in those in-between spaces has also shaped a culture, that sees students as partners in the process of shaping their educational experiences in the program itself. So this culture is rooted in the recognition that students are not just people who are taking our classes, but they're people with whom we're connected, deeply connected, beyond the classroom as fellow residents of neighborhoods, of the city, of our state. Our program students, 74% who are part-time, 65% over 25, close to 70% students of color, Indigenous, bring an incredible amount of wisdom and relationships and experience and drive that would be absolutely foolish not to tap. So for example, in the absence of institutional funding for the degree program, the Community Development Student Organization greatly increased out of the classroom educational opportunities for students, through collaborating with faculty and community partners, around events and field trips and so forth. So key lessons in my final minutes here. What are some of the key lessons to draw from the experience? Well, one of the big ones is that to successfully create and grow such programs, essential ingredients include internal and external advocates with institutional power, access to resources, including funding. In our case, those advocates were key administrators, faculty willing to work collaboratively with each other and local and national partners, and willing to use their knowledge of institutional processes and relationships to make program a reality. So now the program that is established, the challenge has shifted to sustaining the program without startup funding, the funding that it had in its early years, that supported curriculum development, partnership building, paid guest speakers, funded field experiences, professional development activities, and so forth. Those funds haven't been replaced with general funds, and with enrollment declines and budget shortfalls, and now the COVID-19 pandemic, the chance of institutional funding is practically zero at this moment. So now, in wrapping up, we're largely surviving on the passion, interest, and creativity of deans, faculty, community partners, alumni, and current students who have a stake in the program's existence and willingness to work together. And I know I'm about out of time, but I do have, particularly in this context right now, I'm actually hopeful, and perhaps in the Q&A, I can talk about where some of that hope comes from. But I have this saying, and I'll wrap this up with this. We recognize that the current situation is not ideal, but there come these moments where you have to decide, okay, in the cow fields, are you going to see, all right, are you going to see kind of, what are you going to see? Are you going to see, a pile of, crap, or are you going to see fertilizer? and I think of this is a moment, where I actually see some fertilizer in this moment. So with that visualization and metaphor, I will turn it back to Verdis.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Especially with community colleges, we're predicting an influx, maybe just for a year. We're predicting an influx, and I think that we're ready. We just have to make sure that our community college, our civic engagement professionals are at the table as well. So thank you so much for your presentation, Lena, on blending civic and career education in the in-between spaces and using your college at Minneapolis College as an example. And I cannot wait till your chapter comes out so that we can all learn from the challenges as well as some of the successes that you've had with that program. So thank you very much. So now we're going to switch over and we're going to go to Illinois, and where we're going to go to Heartland College and one of their feeder schools, and a very, very unique and interesting relationship that's there, that's forging guided pathways for civic and political engagement. I yield the floor.
All right, great. Thank you, Verdis. We're pretty excited to talk with you today about forging guided pathways for civic and political engagement. And by that, we really mean curricular pathways for students, co-curricular pathways for students, really substantial pathways for students between a community college and a four-year university. With that, we've got Heartland Community College, where I serve as Vice President of Enrollment and Student Services, and
Illinois State University. And I'm Steve Hunt. I'm the director of the School of Communication at Illinois State.
And we want to tell you a little bit about our two colleges. So Heartland and Illinois State are located in central Illinois. We're about 2 hours south of Chicago. Heartland is the public two-year comprehensive community college. We serve right around 5,000 undergraduate students. And in terms of linking our work to our mission, we are largely a transfer institution. About 70% of our undergraduate students are in transfer programs to four-year colleges and universities, with our largest school where our students go right down the street at Illinois State University.
Yeah, so there you see Illinois State. We're a public four-year, a school created in the Normal tradition and in fact located in Normal, Illinois. We have about 18,000 undergraduate students and about 2,000 graduate students. And what do you mean by connected leadership?
Well, you know, it's really important when trying to create that partnership between the two-year and the four-year that your leadership is incredibly connected. And we share a lot of students between Heartland and ISU. As I mentioned, ISU is our largest transfer partner. They're right down the street. We actually hold joint cabinet meetings together. So we share a lot as the two institutions. And to forge guided pathways that involve a transfer pathway for students, it's important that your leadership is connected. And you might notice that Steve and I are in the basement here, and we're not exactly, participating in social distancing. And that happens to be because we also happen to be married. But we don't want you to think that in order to create forged guided pathways for your students that you have to marry someone at the other institution. We hope to give you some things that you can do at your institutions, regardless as to whether you have a marital connection. So with that, we want to talk a little bit about how our two institutions share a commitment to civic engagement.
So you'll see there that Illinois State University was one of the original members of the American Association of State Colleges and Universities Political Engagement Program. And that was a spinoff in 2007 of their larger American Democracy Project. So Illinois State, and I had the great fortune of being involved in the team from Illinois State that started the PEP program on our campus, began there. And then in 2008, as we looked to expand the political engagement project, each of the original institutions was asked to reach out to a partner institution as a way of expanding that project. And so as we talked about our issues at Illinois State, we thought it made perfect sense to reach out to Heartland Community College, given that feeder relationship that we have between the two institutions.
So that was great. Heartland joined into the partnership. As a partnering PEP institution, I started attending ASCU conferences, American Democracy conferences, really bringing that back to my campus, figuring out what it could look like at our community college. And next thing we knew, the Democracy Commitment, which was the community college's version of the American Democracy Project and PEP, was born. And so Heartland Community College was an original member of the TDC. It's really critical as we were learning how to really embed this on campuses, that it becomes a part of your institutional core values, your institutional mission. And so at both Illinois State University and Heartland, it is interwoven into the values of the institution, but also into our institution's general education outcomes, learning outcomes, etc. But it can't just be in words only. And so we found it very important to also dedicate resources to faculty and staff.
And we're really fortunate at Illinois State University to have a Center for Community Engagement and Service Learning. We also receive support through our Center for Teaching, Learning, and Technology. They have a that's designed around professional development for faculty who want to take a course that exists and redesign that for civic and political engagement. So we have a number of resources that are dedicated in that way to support this work.
And Heartland's been fortunate as well. We've been able to provide our faculty with grants and stipends to embed civic engagement and service learning into their courses. We've more recently developed a certification that faculty can sign up for, take a class, and receive compensation once they do that. And we've recently named a faculty coordinator on our campus. We have a campus-wide team, a student-wide team, and our next initiative next year will be to do a mini center on our campus. It will be an office because we don't have quite the funding that the four-year institution does, but it will be an office for civic engagement and service learning on our campus. And we're actually going to apply for a VISTA to see if we can get some help in establishing the processes of that office. Next slide. So when we really look at how to create significant pathways for students, I would say that our earliest efforts really began with joint co-curricular efforts. How could we connect events and activities on our campuses together? And we really designed events and speakers, et cetera, around creating a campus culture of political engagement and awareness. A lot of our joint events and joint programming focused around voter information. So we would hold joint town halls together where we would bring local politicians, statewide politicians in, jointly invite campuses. Some were held at Illinois State, some were held on Heartland's campus. We would run polls of our student bodies that were run jointly together. And last year, we were both participants in the All-In Voter Challenge. And in addition to being part of the national challenge, we also had a little side bet going between institutions. And so our Student Government Association had a bet with their Student Government Association that we would be able to get a higher percentage of our student population to register to vote and to have a voting.
Who won that?
Yeah, I don't want to say who won, but I'll just tell you that Illinois State's SGA threw a nice little pizza party for our SGA.
We were all winners. That's all I'll say about that.
We were all winners.
So recognition days you see listed there, that's another area that we've collaborated together on. So events like Constitution Day, Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and 9/11 Remembrance. And Verdis, if we'll look at the next slide, I think we'll have pictures of some of the 9/11 activities. So you see there the flags that we post on each of the campuses. That's a really cool tradition. It's a great way to get students involved and active on that day. And it's a tradition that continues to this day. And then the next slide will contain, I think, a picture, there we go, of one of the straw polls that we did. This one was from 2012. So again, we have students on both campuses polling students about who they were going to vote for in that election cycle. In addition, they're preparing profiles of each of the candidates. So it's a really kind of interesting way for students to get to gain more political knowledge, to know who the parties are, who the individuals are running on, what their platforms are.
Yeah, and it was also really interesting for us to dive into the data from that straw poll and kind of make some comparisons between the community college student and the four-year university student as well. And then next slide, we really want to talk about how, as our relationship matured, we really wanted to deepen those pathways and deepen that collaboration, and really moved into the space of curricular articulation. Illinois State University had developed a civic engagement responsibility minor that Steve will talk about in just a little bit. And that led us to think about what we could do at the community college in terms of a curricular option for our students, and led us to develop a sequence in civic engagement. And the really cool thing about these two is that our sequence in civic engagement articulates every single hour, every single course into Illinois State's minor.
So speaking of the minor, on the next slide, we'll kind of grab the major objectives, the goals, the learning outcomes for students who participate in a minor. So you see that it's set up so that students are prepared to participate in social change and develop an awareness of social responsibility, to get them ready to be active, engaged citizens in their communities. It's an interdisciplinary program, so it consists of courses from lots of different majors, which has been great. It's also tied into the Redesign initiative that I mentioned earlier. So faculty who choose to redesign their course for civic engagement can enter to a vetting process to have their courses be electives in that minor. So it works well with that. And it, of course, provides students with the opportunities to sharpen those skills that are critical to meaningful civic and political engagement. And then the next slide will demonstrate that it's really a pretty easy minor for students to complete. It's only 21 hours. It has that required core that has the introduction to the introductory course, which is Foundations of Citizenship. And then the culminating experience is a professional practice, an internship, where students design a project that is actually conducted, and then they assess that, a project that's conducted in the community. And you see those elective hours, 12 elective hours that they can choose from as well.
So based on that, Heartland created our civic engagement sequence with the purpose of developing students' abilities to become more fully engaged in local, state, national, and/or international civic affairs. And we really work through the courses and the embedded assessments to assess students' ability to ethically engage with and respond to civic, social, environmental, technological, or economic challenges. That happens to be one of our college's essential competencies, or our learning outcomes that are across our courses. And of course, we want to prepare our students for transfer into Illinois State University's Civic Engagement Responsibility minor. And on the next slide, you'll see that our sequence as well was designed to be very easy for our students on a transfer pathway, or even students in a career pathway, to complete. It's 13 to 16 hours with a required core of 11 to 13. And what we actually did was we worked to embed the civic engagement outcomes into existing transferable courses. So we specifically added outcomes to our English 101 course, our Communication 101 course, and our Political Science 101 course. And then we added a capstone course. Students can choose between a course in activism, where they actually design and carry out a project in a semester, or a course in service learning, where they engage in a substantive service learning project and evaluate the results of that project. In addition, they have elective hours, depending on which of the capstone courses they select, of 2 to 3 hours, where again, they're taking courses that we have on our campus that have embedded civic engagement outcomes. On the next slide, you'll note that in order really for us to pull all of this off and to be able to work seamlessly between our two schools, we really have to work to share a lot of our resources.
So campus speakers, you know, when we have speakers at either of the campuses, we're working together to coordinate so that we make that available to all students on both campuses. And that's kind of an easy thing that, of course, you would think we would do. We also share a lot of faculty professional development. So over the years, we've had initiatives that were done on our campus that were open to Heartland Community College faculty, and vice versa. And then 2 years ago, we had Heartland faculty join an initiative. It was actually a grant-funded professional development initiative that was funded by the McCormick Foundation that combined all campuses affiliated with the American Democracy Project in the state of Illinois, and our colleagues from Heartland worked on that particular initiative, which was really a fantastic opportunity.
We also work to collectively leverage our community partners. I would say before this partnership became in earnest, we would go to community partners for something. Illinois State University would go to our community partners and nonprofits for something, and we did it separately. Now we really try to engage them as a collective with how can we provide civic engagement opportunities in the local community for our students. And one way that we do that is both of our institutions leverage something called the Engage platform. And that's really where our student organizations and student life live, is on that platform. So we're both on the same platform. And I'm really excited about something we're looking into next year, where we're going to add a plug-in to that platform called Give Pulse that will really allow us to set up a centralized network in our community that connects our local nonprofit and community organizations with our students for engagement opportunities. So in other words, if they have an opportunity where they're looking for college students to participate, they go into the platform, they plug it in. And our students, whether they're on Illinois State University's campus or our campus, and actually we're also looking to partner with our local private institution in town, can all go into this platform and connect with our local organizations and resources. So we've really worked hard to really leverage and share resources, which helps on expenses as well.
I believe that's the last slide.
Yeah, I think that's it for us today.
All right, great. Thank you so much. It does help to be married, but you know, not all of us are that fortunate, but we can still forge these partnerships, these relationships, especially with our feeder schools. As almost 50% of nationally of transfers are in from 2-year to 4-year. So I praise your exemplary work, and without further ado, we're gonna go on to Hawaii and see what's going on down over there. So Bob Franco and your team created a chapter called "The Arc of Assessment is Long: Kapi'olani's Service and Sustainability Learning Programs Assessment." So the floor is all yours, Bob.
Yeah, thank you. Why don't you go to my first slide? I try to condense this as best I can. Aloha, everybody. I'm at Kapi'olani Community College, which is one of 10 campuses in the University of Hawaii higher ed system. So there's a lot of system integration that has to occur across these initiatives. Our campus has about 7,000 students. We'll see how many show up in the fall. We are a Native Hawaiian serving institution designated by the U.S. Department of Education. We decided, and particularly my role in institutional effectiveness, was to really focus on assessment and to see what was coming out of our service learning inputs, our service learning program. So this talk is really about getting faculty to be engaged in assessment for program durability. We used to call this institutionalization, and people's eyes would kind of glaze over. What do you mean by that? So, and then we moved to program sustainability, but now sustainability has this other meaning in terms of sort of environmental and social sustainability. So we're using the word durability here. How does faculty scholarship in assessment contribute to program durability? At KCC, we had a group, an even larger group over time, but these were the 4 key people: Francisco Acoba, myself, Krista Heiser. Tanya Renner's been assessing this program since 1997 because of the way the model's set up. We have about 40 to 50 service learning courses in which the service learning is an attractive optional assignment. So students in those 40 courses, it might be 5 that choose to do service learning and another 25 who don't. So you have a sort of a control. You can see how service learning students do in terms of course success, re-enrollment, time to degree completion, compared with the non-service learning students. And we were able to do that because we have a partnership with UH Manoa, which is just down the street from us. We're on the slopes of Diamond Head, have always branded ourselves as Indigenous, intercultural, and international. We've had as many as 1,000 international students on the campus since the early 90s. So Tanya has started the assessment model at KCC way back in the late 90s. But Yao Hill, who was worked for me in my office, she moved to Manoa, and she's now the Assessment and Curriculum Support Center researcher. So she is nice because she's sort of internal, but she's also an external evaluator, and enables us to sort of do internal evaluation within my office and have an external evaluator at the Manoa campus. And I want to emphasize that sort of the inside-outside nature of service learning and civic engagement, or the internal-external part of it. So I think over time, we've looked at the external partnership piece through the Carnegie Community Engagement classification. So that would be an external kind of assessment. How are we doing in terms of connecting service learning with community partners? And we helped create that classification. It was in part based on a Campus Compact publication called Indicators of Engagement in the Two-Year College, 2004 or so. And we are Carnegie classified through 2025. A big turning point in our assessment was 2014, service learning and achieving institutional outcomes, engagement, learning, and achievement. And we really targeted those earlier measures I talked about. Do students have higher course success rates if they choose the service learning assignment? Do they re-enroll at higher rates than non-service learning students? Do they complete degrees? Do they have higher GPAs than non-service learning students? And we found that was generally the case. We also used the community college survey of student engagement, and we found that service learning students scored way higher on all 5 engagement benchmarks. And I won't go into those, but there is a way to measure engagement through the survey of student engagement, both the national one and the community college one. That publication kind of really got us thinking about internally, what does service learning do internally in terms of the institution and its desired outcomes? We moved even further internally, but we worked with 5 other, I should say that 2014 publication was led by Amy Traver and Ziva Perel-Katz at Queensborough Community College. And it is really, really state-of-the-art. If you have a chance to purchase that publication, it really goes through the whole why service learning is so essential to community colleges. So in 16, we got a grant from the Chico Foundation called Teaching to Big Questions. And I'll just add here that links to each and every one of these is in my final slide. So I won't have to go into them too deeply. But in this one, the big question was, and this was across 6 community colleges, how do we build our civic and how do we build our commitment to civic and moral responsibility for diverse, equitable, healthy, and sustainable communities? That question got so large because each of the campuses was focusing on a different component, either equity or diversity or health or sustainability. And so we developed a common set of reflection prompts. That's up at the Teaching to Big Questions website. We used an AAC&U values rubric to score those reflection essays that students wrote. And then we used the results of that assessment to change the way we did our service learning program. A lot of this focused again on, the experience students were getting at the community partner and how can we strengthen the community partner's understanding that we really see them as part of the learning environment here, and trying to connect that piece up. But there were other things that popped up. We thought statement of the problem would be a fairly easy reflection prompt, but students were talking about problems, getting on the bus, time, not really the problem they were working on, such as illiteracy or poverty or environmental protection. So we really realized that when we talk about statement of the problem, which is the sort of the core of the scientific method, we weren't teaching that very well. And it really wasn't service learning's role to do that, but it was really kind of a general education commitment that students should be able to identify social problems and then through service learning mitigate them or ameliorate them. Next slide, please. So then moving into the campus, we developed a sustainability and climate action plan. This is the question in Hawaii now, or was before COVID, was how in the world is Hawaii going to survive climate change, sea level rise, the death of our coral reefs, water quality problems, a whole list of grand challenges that the state and the people of Hawaii have to address. So we developed the first sustainability and climate action plan for the UH system. That was done at the same time we developed our civic action plan. And then maybe thinking of this as moving outward or externally again, we've aligned the service learning program with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So that's how we've aligned service with sort of real world issues that are on the minds of our students. And I think we're trying to lead a conversation and a movement to really think about how well are we preparing students for a planet that we are destroying. And what are we going to do about that? And so we're trying to move into an intergenerational conversation with our students. How can we as a campus better prepare you for the world we've done so much damage to? So that's a very rich conversation. That led to some engagement with the National Council for Science and Environment. We developed a handbook of sustainability education and operations. And we have a chapter on assessment there led by Krista Heiser. So we continue to sort of, when we do things, assess and see what's working and what's not. And then finally, using the Association for Advancing Sustainability in Higher Education, or ASHE, they have an ASHE STARS criteria that we're using to assess the Sustainability and Climate Action Plan. And again, these links are all on the next page, so I won't have to go into these in too much detail. I would just conclude by Kapi'olani Service Learning has always kind of been had an issues focus to it. That is, we've identified significant issues in our own community and issues that our students can do things about. So we're organized, the program's organized around education. There's an educational pathway, there's an environmental pathway, there's a bridging generations pathway and a health pathway, as well as an arts, history, and culture pathway. And each of those pathways have specific courses in them and then specific community partners. And so we do transfer. I love the conversation earlier about the 2-year, 4-year transfer pathway. We work with the UH Manoa College of Social Sciences. They have an access center, which is access to civic and community engagement in the social sciences. And so we send a lot of students, a lot of our student leaders transfer directly into that program. And finally, the Indigenous piece is also very alive. We're developing a kind of place-based approach within our Native Hawaiian programming. So there are similarities across the 3 campuses, and hopefully these will all come out and be detailed in the new publication. With that, I'll conclude. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Bob, and thanks to everyone. And we can all maybe rejoin the video, Lena and the Hunts. So the first question that came in, I think everybody can have a crack at if you'd like to, which is, what are some things you're doing in your institutions to work with K-12 schools and students in communities connecting to civic engagement, social justice, service, et cetera? So who wants to take a first run, and then we can pass it around?
I can. You may know we got a HUD, Office of University Partnership grant to redesign a learning center at Palolo Public Housing, and that learning center is basically open to KCC, UH Manoa, and Chaminade University service learning to provide literacy and a range of programs for low-income youth in the housing. all of those youth go to Palolo Elementary School. We help set up a Head Start classroom there. So there's ongoing focus. So that we can catch the students at the school, or we can catch them at the learning center we've created. And we've been doing that for almost 20 years. It actually started with the Campus Compact grant to bridge the digital divide back in the late 90s. So those are the kinds of things. The school settings are hard. We have a sustainability certificate that we're offering at high schools so that those students can finish our academic subject certificate in high schools and then come to us really halfway through the AA degree. But the K-12 school engagement is pretty hard to sustain. There's a lot of turnover in administration and not a great willingness to have their school facilities available to us. So that was why we decided to create an off-campus facility at a public housing community. I think that's probably something that's easier.
So and just wondering if others might have any examples
Sure.
of efforts in that regard. Thank you, Bob.
Yes, at Heartland, I would say our deepest connection with K-12 is through our dual credit partnership. So it's a curricular partnership. And so because we have that civic engagement, essential competency learning outcome that's a part of all of our courses, we train our dual credit instructors on how to deliver that essential competency through the curriculum. And I would say when I think of our faculty who are doing stellar work around service learning and civic engagement in their courses, many of those are in our dual credit courses in the high schools. We've got an incredible earth science class at one of our high schools that actually comes out and does research into our pond on campus. But it really is a curricular connection through us through the dual credit.
Lena, anything on that one you'd like to share?
Wait. Nope, I'm good.
You're good. Oh no, sorry. I just didn't know you were muted, so I was like, oh. But then
Yeah. I mean, we don't have any sort of intentional structured program with K-12 institutions. We like to, but yeah, our focus has been kind of on the other side of the pipeline, kind of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. I think we have time for one more that maybe people can take a quick shot, and this is like a bigger question. And maybe, Lena, I'll throw it your way if you want to start. We can work back the other direction. Just whether in the work you're doing, you experience the goals you're pursuing in terms of sort of civic education, et cetera, as being in tension with goals of workforce development. Like what's the relationship between that and your actual experience?
Yeah, it's interesting. All right, how can I answer that question really briefly? Okay.
And I know, I was about to say, we have like 2 minutes, so it's like the lightning round, but it's way too big a question.
So, yes, some tension, particularly within the context of our institution. Where that tension has come up, one of the places has been around efforts to, there have been some efforts and desires to particularly build bridges between, say, liberal arts parts of the college and career and technical parts of the college. But there, again, kind of like what I've talked about before, there have been some institutional barriers to that. I can refer you to an article I wrote that actually talks about this in New Directions Community Colleges a few years back. I actually did an article about that. So
okay, and if somebody can find that and throw it in the chats, that would be great.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody out there can do that.
Yeah, one quick thing. Krista and I and Francisco published an article for AAC and U's Diversity and Democracy. It was called Bells Without Clappers. That, if you were going to Google it, it really, we use the metaphor of a bell being sort of just educating for a career, and then not having the clapper, which is the voice and the noise and the resonance and the way. If you think about bells we use bells as a metaphor. So if you Google bells without clappers, I'm sure you'll find it because no one else has used that particular metaphor. But it does contrast civic engagement, civic voice with career education.
Yeah, and I would say for us, we don't have that tension. We are trying to grow Career Technical. It's a major initiative at our college, but we're fortunate all the way up to the top. Our president, we're under a theme right now around civic engagement because we believe that the skill sets that we teach around civic engagement are the same skill sets that employers want, right? And our employers in our community want people who are engaged in the community. So the connection between the two skill sets is so evident. And if one of our institutional priorities, which it is to serve as a community resource, we're here to produce active and engaged students in our communities. And that's what our major employers are looking at too, is they want employees who will stay, who are committed, who are engaged. So I think the connectivity for us is just there.
Well, that is a perfect place to land, because I hope
they want bells with clappers. Yeah,
exactly. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Lena. Thank you to Sarah and Steve and to Verdis. We are now heading directly into our closing session. Starts immediately afterward. There's no break. So we'll sort of disappear and reappear magically. But again, thank you all for sharing really insightful work and for the things you're doing on the ground that gave rise to all of it. So we'll see folks back in a few seconds.
Thank you all. Mahalo.
Thank you.